My name is Natalie Harper, and the day my own sister tried to throw me out of my own lakeside house was the day I decided I would one day make her sign a legal agreement at my kitchen table before she was allowed to step foot on my property again. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because I need to know I'm not the only woman who's had to reclaim her own front door. It was late Sunday afternoon when I pulled into the gravel driveway of my lake house in northern Michigan, the place I bought 3 years ago after working 80-hour weeks and living on takeout. The sun was low, turning the water gold, and for a brief, foolish second, I felt peace. Then I saw the unfamiliar SUV. I frowned. I hadn't given anyone the gate code. When I stepped onto the porch, I heard laughter, glass clinking, music, inside my house. I unlocked the door with my key, and walked straight into my living room. Vanessa, my younger sister, Vanessa Reed, 30, dramatic, chronically allergic to accountability, was sprawled across my cream sofa like a lifestyle influencer on a brand shoot. In her hand, a glass of my Cabernet. Across from her, Trevor, her husband, tall, permanently smug, the kind of man who says, "Relax," when he's the one causing the chaos, sat in my armchair with his boots on my reclaimed wood coffee table. The fireplace was on, my fireplace. Vanessa looked up first. She didn't look surprised. "Oh," she said flatly, "you're back." I set my overnight bag down slowly. "Why are you in my house?" Trevor didn't move his feet. "We thought you weren't coming until Tuesday." I blinked. "Excuse me," Vanessa stood, smoothing her sweater. "Mom gave us the spare key." "There is no spare key," I said quietly. She smiled. Well, there was. The air shifted. The lake outside felt colder. "Get your things," I said evenly, "and leave." Vanessa's expression hardened instantly. "This is ridiculous. We needed a place to stay for a few weeks. You didn't ask. You would have said no." "Exactly." Trevor finally stood, rolling his shoulders. "Let's not make this dramatic, Natalie. We're family." I let out a soft laugh. "Family doesn't break into each other's homes." Vanessa's voice turned sharp, venomous. "Get out of here or I'll call the police and tell them you're harassing us." The audacity almost impressed me. I stepped closer, meeting her eyes. "Try it," I said calmly, "and you'll regret it." Silence. Trevor shifted his weight. "Vanessa, maybe we should just—" "No," she snapped. "She thinks she's better than everyone because she owns property." "I own this property," I corrected. "You're trespassing." She crossed her arms. "Mom said this house was basically the family's anyway. You barely use it." I felt something inside me click into place. Not explode. Click. Like a lock turning. "This house," I said slowly, "is mine. I paid for it. I pay the taxes. I renovated every inch of it myself." "You're being selfish," Vanessa shot back. "We're struggling." "You're always struggling," I replied, "because you assume someone else will fix it." Trevor held up his hands. Okay, let's calm down. We're here now. Let's just coexist." "In my house?" I asked. Vanessa walked toward the hallway like she lived there. "We're taking the guest room." I stepped in front of her. "No, you're not." Her eyes flashed. "You can't just throw us out." "Watch me." Our voices rose, sharp and slicing. A door slammed when Trevor grabbed his jacket. Vanessa knocked over a decorative bowl on the console table. The house echoed with anger that didn't belong in it. This place was supposed to be my sanctuary, the one thing in my life no one could invade. And yet here she was, again. Vanessa leaned in close enough for me to smell my own wine on her breath. "You think this makes you powerful?" I met her stare. "No, boundaries do." The lake outside was still. Inside, we were at war. And in that moment, standing in my own living room, I realized this wasn't just about a few weeks on a couch. This was about my space, my peace, my name on the deed. And I was done being the generous sister who always absorbed the damage. This time I would reclaim everything, starting with my front door. That same evening, after 2 hours of slamming cabinets, icy silences, and pointed footsteps echoing down my hallway, Trevor knocked on my bedroom door while the sky outside turned ink blue over the lake. I opened it halfway. "What?" He stood there holding 2 mugs like we were neighbors in a sitcom instead of enemies in a property dispute. "Chamomile," he said, "peace offering. I don't drink tea from people who trespass." He sighed. "Can we just talk?" Against my better judgment, I stepped into the hallway and closed the door behind me. Vanessa was nowhere in sight. I could hear the TV murmuring from the living room. Trevor leaned against the wall. "Look, this isn't how we wanted it to go." "How did you want it to go?" I asked. "You break in, I hug you." "We didn't break in." You used a key you weren't given. Your mom said, my mom doesn't own this house. He rubbed his face. For the first time, he looked tired instead of smug. It's somewhere temporary, just until we figure things out. You mean until you find someone else to finance your figuring? That's not fair, I tilted my head. No, because from where I'm standing it feels very accurate. He exhaled sharply. Natalie, let's just live in peace while we're here, all right. There it was, the assumption, not may we stay, not can we discuss this. While we're here, I folded my arms. You're not here, you're being tolerated. He nodded slowly. Fine, tolerated. But constant fighting won't help anyone. Then leave. Vanessa's voice cut through the room as she stepped into the hallway. We're not leaving. She had changed into one of my oversized sweatshirts. I recognized the small paint stain on the sleeve from when I renovated the deck last spring. That's mine, I said flatly. She looked down at it. It's just a sweatshirt. It's just my house. Her jaw tightened. Trevor stepped between us like a referee. Enough, we can coexist. We stay out of your way. You stay out of ours. I let out a soft laugh. You don't get to carve out territory in my home. Vanessa crossed her arms. Then what do you want? Finally, the right question. I want rules, I said. Trevor nodded. Okay, rule 1, I continued. No guests, not one person sets foot here without my permission. Vanessa rolled her eyes. We're not throwing a parade. I didn't ask for commentary. She looked like she wanted to snap back, but Trevor nudged her arm. Rule 2, I said. You stay out of my office, completely off limits. Trevor raised his hands. Fine. Rule 3, quiet hours after 10. I work from here most days. This is not a vacation rental. Vanessa gave a dry laugh. You and your schedules. Yes, me and my mortgage. Silence fell. Trevor spoke carefully. Anything else? Yes. I looked directly at Vanessa. You do not touch my belongings, clothes, kitchen appliances, anything. If it's not yours, you ask. She stared at me like I'd insulted her. You're acting like we're criminals. You walked into my house without permission. That's different. How? She didn't answer. Trevor extended his hand awkwardly. All right, your rules. I didn't shake it. You break them, I added quietly, and you're out. Vanessa scoffed. You can't just throw us out. I held her gaze. Try me. For a moment something flickered in her eyes, not fear, not quite, calculation. Fine, she said finally. We'll follow your precious rules. The three of us stood there in the narrow hallway like strangers forced into a ceasefire. From the living room, the fireplace crackled softly. Outside, fog began rolling over the lake, thick and quiet. Trevor turned toward the guest room. Truce. For now, I replied. Vanessa brushed past me, shoulder grazing mine just a little too hard. Don't get comfortable, she muttered. I closed my bedroom door and leaned against it, listening to their footsteps retreat. The house felt divided now. Not physically, emotionally. Different corners, different territories, different tensions humming under the same roof. A false calm settled over the place like fog pretending to be peace. But I knew better. Fog hides things. And I had the feeling this was only the beginning. 3 days later, the lake looked peaceful, but inside my house it felt like living inside a pressure cooker with the lid rattling softly. It started with almond milk. I walked into the kitchen at 6:30 in the morning, hair still damp from the shower, mentally rehearsing my presentation for a client call. I opened the fridge, empty carton, I held it up. Vanessa, she was at the counter scrolling through her phone, chewing toast. What? Where's my almond milk? She didn't even look up. Oh, I used it. All of it, there wasn't much left. There was a full carton yesterday, she shrugged. Guess you misjudged. I stared at her. You didn't ask. It's milk, Natalie, relax. It's mine. Trevor entered from the hallway, pulling on a jacket. What's going on? She's interrogating me over milk, Vanessa said dramatically. I set the carton down carefully. It's not about milk. It's always about something, Vanessa muttered. Trevor gave me a tight smile. We'll replace it. You said that about the olive oil, I replied. His smile faded slightly. And we did. A week later. Vanessa pushed her plate away. You track groceries now. Is that your new hobby? No, I said evenly. My hobby is not being taken advantage of. Silence. Trevor cleared his throat. I've got a job interview this afternoon, I blinked. You do? Yeah, he said quickly. Marketing firm in Traverse City. That's good, I said genuinely. That's really good. Vanessa's eyes flicked between us. He's had interviews before. And, I asked. And nothing ever sticks, she snapped. Trevor shot her a look. Thanks for the confidence boost. I left the kitchen before the conversation spiraled, but by the time I returned from my call, muddy boot prints trailed across my foyer rug. I closed my eyes. Trevor, I called. He appeared from the guest room. Yeah, shoes off in the house. Oh, come on, he said, glancing at the floor. It's just dirt. It's imported wool. He stared at me like I'd spoken another language. You're kidding. I'm not. Vanessa's voice floated in from the living room. This isn't a museum. No, I replied, stepping into the doorway. It's my home. She was sprawled on the couch again, music playing softly from her phone, not loud, just loud enough. What now? She asked. Music after 10 is against the rules. It's 3 in the afternoon. I work from home, she rolled her eyes. God, you're always working. Do you ever just exist? I exist very comfortably when people respect my space. Trevor stepped in again, hands raised. We'll turn it down. Vanessa grabbed the phone but didn't lower the volume. You know what your problem is, she said. You don't know how to share. I let out a slow breath. Sharing requires permission. Family doesn't need permission. That's exactly where you're wrong. The room fell quiet. For a moment I saw something flicker in her face, not anger, something older, resentment. You've always acted like you're better than me, she said suddenly. I've never. Yes, you have, she cut in. You buy houses, you renovate decks. You set rules, you act like you're the responsible one. I am the responsible one, I said before I could stop myself. Her eyes darkened. There it is. Trevor stepped closer to her. Vanessa. No, she said, standing. She thinks because she makes more money she gets to dictate everything. I dictate what happens in my house, I replied. You love that word, she said bitterly. My house, my rules, my boundaries. Yes, I said quietly. I do. She laughed, but it wasn't amused. You're always so uptight. And you're always so entitled. The words landed heavy between us. Trevor exhaled sharply. This is pointless. No, I said, it's predictable. Vanessa stared at me for a long second. You think you're the victim here. I think I opened my home to you. You didn't open it, she shot back. You're guarding it like a dragon. Because every time I lower the gate, I replied softly, something goes missing. The silence that followed was thicker than any shouting match. Trevor finally looked down at the muddy prints. I'll clean it, he muttered. Vanessa grabbed her phone and walked toward the deck, sliding the door open harder than necessary. The cold air rushed in. I stood in the middle of my living room and looked around. Same walls, same furniture, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like a negotiation. Like every fork, every cushion, every inch of hardwood was part of some invisible tug-of-war. And the worst part? The battles were small. Milk, boots. Music, tiny things. But tiny things, repeated often enough, become erosion. And I could feel something wearing down. Not my house. My patience. That Friday night, I came back from a late grocery run just after 9, the sky over the lake black and starless, and I knew something was wrong before I even opened the front door. Cars, 5 of them, parked crooked across my driveway and lawn. Music pulsed through the walls, bass-heavy, loud, invasive. I unlocked the door and stepped into chaos. Strangers. Everywhere, a woman in glitter heels was standing on my coffee table. 2 guys I'd never seen before were arguing near my kitchen island, red plastic cups in their hands. Someone had moved my accent chairs against the wall to create space for dancing. And Vanessa, center of it all, was laughing like this was her stage. What is this? I demanded. The music didn't even dip. Trevor spotted me first. His face drained of color. He hurried over. Natalie, what is this? I repeated louder. Vanessa turned, holding a drink. Oh, you're back, like I'd stepped out of a bar. In my house? I asked. It's just a small get-together, she said breezily. You're always saying we should make memories. With strangers, they're friends. They are not my friends. A man brushed past me and nearly knocked into the hallway console. Bathroom, he slurred. No, I said sharply. Vanessa rolled her eyes. Relax, we cleaned up before. You what? She gestured vaguely. You weren't here. The audacity stole my breath for a second. I scanned the room. My rug, my cream wool rug, already had dark stains spreading near the edge. Someone had placed a sweating bottle directly on my wooden sideboard, no coaster. Turn it off, I said to Trevor, pointing at the speaker. He hesitated. Maybe let's not escalate. Turn it off. He moved toward it, but Vanessa stepped in front of him. Don't. The music kept pounding. You don't get to command people like this, she snapped at me. I absolutely do, I replied calmly. This is my property. God, you're insufferable. And you're reckless. Her jaw tightened. We needed something fun. Then rent a venue, she laughed bitterly. Not all of us can throw money at everything. That's because I don't throw it, I said. I earn it, her eyes flashed. A glass shattered near the fireplace. That was it. I pulled my phone out of my coat pocket. Vanessa's smile faltered. What are you doing? I'm ending this, she scoffed. You wouldn't. Held her gaze as I dialed. 911, what's your emergency? Vanessa lunged toward me. Natalie, don't you dare. There are unauthorized individuals in my home, I said clearly into the phone. I need assistance removing them. The room shifted, conversations faltered, people started looking around. Vanessa's face went white. You are unbelievable. No, I said softly, I'm done. Trevor stepped forward, lowering his voice. We can fix this, just hang up. I tried fixing it. Within 10 minutes, flashing blue and red lights reflected off the lake. The music cut off abruptly this time. Two officers entered calmly but firmly. Evening, one of them said. Who's the homeowner? I am, I answered. Vanessa stepped forward. We live here, the officer looked at me. Ma'am, they do not, I said steadily. They're temporary guests. This gathering was not permitted. Murmurs spread through the crowd. The officers began ushering people out, checking IDs, issuing warnings. A girl in glitter heels shot Vanessa an annoyed look. You said it was fine. Vanessa's composure cracked. It was. Trevor stood frozen, watching the exodus. I moved to the front door and held it open as strangers filed past me, some embarrassed, some irritated. One of the officers turned to Vanessa. Next time, make sure you have the owner's consent. There won't be a next time, I said before she could answer. When the last car finally pulled away and the flashing lights disappeared down the road, silence flooded back into the house. Heavy, real, Vanessa stood in the middle of the living room, arms wrapped around herself. You humiliated me. You humiliated yourself. Trevor ran a hand through his hair. This got out of hand. Yes, I agreed. It did. Vanessa stormed down the hallway and slammed the guest room door so hard a picture frame rattled. Trevor lingered. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For what part? I asked. All of it. I studied him. His shoulders were slumped now, the arrogance was gone, he looked tired. This wasn't fair to you, he admitted. She doesn't think long-term. No, I said, she doesn't. He picked up a trash bag from the kitchen and began gathering cups without another word. For the first time since they'd arrived, I didn't feel invaded. I felt in control. As I stood in my doorway, watching Trevor quietly clean up the mess he'd helped create, I realized something important. Power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it dials. The morning after the party, the house smelled faintly of disinfectant and regret. I woke up earlier than usual, half expecting to find glitter embedded in the hardwood and strangers asleep on my deck. Instead, the kitchen was clean, not spotless, but cleaned. Trash bags were stacked neatly by the back door. The wine-stained rug had been blotted and propped up near the fireplace to dry. My glassware was lined up on a towel, washed. Trevor stood at the counter, making coffee. He looked up when he heard me. Morning, I paused. Morning. I used your good beans, he added. Hope that's okay. At least you're asking. A faint smile flickered across his face. Fair. He handed me a mug before I could refuse it. I really am sorry about last night. I studied him over the rim. You said that already. I know, I just mean it. The silence between us wasn't sharp anymore, it was cautious. Vanessa hadn't emerged from the guest room. She's still asleep? I asked. Trevor nodded. She had a rough night. I had a rough night, I replied calmly. He winced. Yeah. We stood there for a moment, the lake visible through the window, still and indifferent. I fixed that cabinet hinge in the hallway, he said suddenly. It was loose. I blinked. You did? Yeah, and the porch light. It kept flickering. I hadn't mentioned either issue out loud. Why? I asked. He shrugged. It needed fixing. There was no sarcasm in it. Over the next few days, the pattern continued. The dog, my golden retriever, Maple, was walked before I even laced my shoes. The garbage was taken out without being asked. A broken deck board I'd been meaning to replace was measured and reinforced. Small things, responsible things. One afternoon, I found him crouched near the dock, tightening a loose plank. You don't have to do that, I said. He looked up. I know. Then why are you? He stood, wiping his hands on a rag. Because you shouldn't have to carry everything. I folded my arms. That's ironic. He didn't argue. Instead, he leaned against the railing. Vanessa's a little impulsive. That's a generous word, he exhaled slowly. She's always been like that, big emotions, big reactions. And no consequences. His jaw tightened slightly. She respects you more than she shows. I let out a quiet laugh. That's not respect. It's envy, he corrected. The word hung between us. I didn't respond. He continued carefully. You built something stable. She's still figuring herself out. She's 30. I know. We stood in silence again, watching a fishing boat glide across the water. You think I'm the villain, he said after a moment. I think you enabled her, I replied. He nodded once. That's fair. The honesty disarmed me more than defensiveness would have. Inside the house, Vanessa remained distant. Headphones in. Phone always in hand. Minimal conversation. When she did speak, it was clipped. But the house itself felt steadier. Not peaceful, just managed. One morning I came downstairs to find coffee already brewed, maple-fed, and a fresh carton of almond milk in the fridge. Trevor leaned against the counter. Got your brand? I raised an eyebrow. Reading labels now. Trying to. I didn't thank him, but I noticed. And that was the part that unsettled me most. Because consistency is harder to fight than chaos. And I couldn't tell if this shift was growth or strategy. That night, as I locked my office door and glanced down the hallway toward the guest room, I caught myself wondering something dangerous. What if Trevor was becoming an ally? And if he was, what would that mean for the war I was still fighting? It was Tuesday afternoon when my phone started vibrating nonstop while I was reviewing invoices at the kitchen table. First, Aunt Melissa. I almost didn't answer. Natalie, she said, her tone unusually stiff. I heard there's tension at the lake house. That's one way to put it, I replied carefully, a pause. Vanessa said you kicked her out of her own family home. I blinked. Her what? She told us your parents helped you buy it, that it was always meant to be shared. I felt something cold settle in my chest. That's not true, another pause. Well, she sounded very hurt. After we hung up, I stared at my phone. 5 missed calls, 2 from cousins, 1 from my mother. Then a text from cousin Laura. I don't know why you're being so harsh. She's your sister, harsh. I looked around my kitchen, the countertops I'd saved for, the cabinets I'd installed myself, the view I'd earned, harsh. My phone rang again. This time, Aunt Colleen. I don't want to take sides, she began immediately, which is what people say right before they do. But Vanessa told us you've been controlling and cruel, that you're threatening to leave her homeless. She's not homeless, I said quietly. She's living in my guest room. Well, she said you've been screaming at her and making her feel unwelcome. That's because she is unwelcome. Colleen exhaled sharply. Natalie, I ended the call before she could finish. The air in the house felt heavier than it had during the party. Not because of noise, because of narrative. I stood slowly and walked down the hallway. Vanessa was in the living room, curled into the corner of the couch, scrolling through her phone with exaggerated calm. Have you been calling our relatives? I asked. She didn't look up. Maybe. And telling them I kicked you out of your own family home? Now she looked at me. Her expression was mild, almost bored. I told them how I feel. You told them lies, she shrugged. Perspective. My name is on the deed. And Mom and Dad helped you when you were starting out. They didn't, she tilted her head. They supported you emotionally. I let out a disbelieving breath. So now emotional support equals equity. You act like you built everything alone. I did, her eyes sharpened. That's your problem. What is? You always need to be the self-made success story. I stared at her. This isn't about my image, it's about truth. Truth, she repeated softly. The truth is you never wanted us here. I didn't invite you. That's not the same thing. It is, she stood slowly. The family deserves to know how you treat people. You mean how I enforce boundaries. You mean how you isolate yourself and call it strength. That one landed. I held her gaze. You don't get to rewrite this. She stepped closer. Maybe they're just finally seeing you for who you are. The words weren't shouted. They were delivered gently, which made them worse. You're twisting everything, I said, my voice quieter now. She folded her arms. Maybe they're just connecting dots. By using your version. By using their own eyes. I felt something break, not loud, not dramatic, just a fracture. You're trying to turn them against me, I said. No, she replied. I'm protecting myself. From what? From you. Silence filled the space between us. Trevor appeared in the doorway, tension written across his face. What's going on? She's campaigning, I said flatly. Vanessa rolled her eyes. See, dramatic. Trevor looked between us. Vanessa, I'm not lying, she snapped. I told them how hostile it feels here. You're not a victim, I said. Her lips trembled for a split second, whether from anger or something else I couldn't tell. You've always thought I was weak, she said quietly. I think you avoid accountability. And you hide behind rules. The lake outside was still. Inside, something irreversible had shifted. The party had been reckless. The milk had been petty. But this was strategic. She wasn't fighting for space anymore. She was fighting for reputation. And family loyalty is a weapon when someone knows how to use it. As she turned away, phone already in her hand again, I realized something with chilling clarity. She wasn't just trying to live in my house. She was trying to live in my narrative. And that was a line I wasn't going to let her cross. That night, after the last call from an aunt who suddenly sounded like a judge instead of family, I sat alone at my kitchen table staring at my phone. Vanessa was out with Trevor. Grocery run, she'd said flatly, keys already in hand. The house was quiet, too quiet. I looked around at my walls, my windows, my floors. Everything I'd built felt like it was slipping through my fingers, not physically but socially. She was eroding me from the outside now. And I was done waiting. I picked up my phone and made one call. Hi, I said calmly when the locksmith answered. I need all exterior locks changed tonight. An hour later, I stood on the porch as the locksmith finished installing the final deadbolt. The metallic click echoed in the still air. New keys, he said, handing them to me. I wrapped my fingers around them. Control. Solid. Real. When he left, I reprogrammed the security code, deleting the temporary one I'd set the week before. I stood inside the foyer afterward, listening to the hum of the system resetting. It felt final. At 9:17 p.m., headlights swept across the front windows. Their SUV, I didn't move, the engine shut off. Car doors slammed, footsteps approached. The handle rattled, once, twice, then harder. What the? Trevor's voice. Vanessa's sharper. Natalie. I stayed where I was, visible through the glass but unmoving. The knocking started. Natalie, open the door, Trevor called. I walked forward slowly and stopped on the other side of the entryway, the door between us. I changed the locks, I said evenly. Vanessa stared at me through the glass like I'd slapped her. Are you insane? No, Trevor tried the handle again, uselessly. You can't do this. I can, Vanessa's voice rose. All our things are inside. You'll get them, I replied. At a scheduled time. She stepped back, hands flying up. You've crossed too many lines, Natalie. I almost smiled at the irony. I've crossed too many lines, I corrected calmly. You're not welcome here anymore. Trevor lowered his voice, trying reason. Let's not escalate, just unlock it and we'll talk. We've been talking. Vanessa's composure shattered. You're evil, she screamed. You're throwing your own sister out. Stop rewriting this, I said quietly. Neighbors' porch lights flicked on one by one. Curtains shifted. The lake air carried every word. You think you can just discard us? Vanessa yelled. We'll sue you. For what? I asked, protecting my property. Trevor turned to her. Vanessa, lower your voice. No, she pounded on the door. Open it. I didn't flinch. You have 10 minutes, I said steadily. Then I'm calling the police. Her face went pale with rage. You wouldn't dare. You already know I would. That shut her up. For a moment, the only sound was the wind off the lake and the faint rustle of curious neighbors pretending not to watch. Trevor ran a hand over his face. Where are we supposed to go? That's not my responsibility anymore. Vanessa stared at me like she didn't recognize me. Maybe she didn't, because the version of me she relied on, the accommodating, forgiving one, was gone. You're going to regret this, she whispered. No, I said softly. I'm going to sleep peacefully. She let out a broken laugh that bordered on hysteria. You think this makes you strong? No, I replied. It makes me finished. Trevor placed a hand on her arm. Let's go. She resisted for a second, glaring at me through the glass like she could burn the house down with her eyes. Then she spun toward the car. As their engine roared back to life and the SUV reversed out of my driveway, I stood alone in the foyer. The neighbors' lights slowly flicked off. Silence returned. Not false calm. Real. I locked the deadbolt again, even though it was already locked, just to feel the click. Sometimes dignity doesn't arrive with applause. Sometimes it arrives with a key turning in a door and the courage not to open it again. 3 days after I changed the locks, I was finally beginning to breathe again. The house felt like mine. Quiet mornings. Maple curled at my feet. Coffee on the deck while the lake reflected a pale winter sun. I had almost convinced myself the storm had passed. Then the doorbell rang, not a polite press. A long, aggressive hold. I opened the door halfway, keeping the chain latched. Vanessa stood on the porch, hair unbrushed, eyes rimmed red. Trevor stood slightly behind her, hands in his coat pockets, unreadable. "You have 5 minutes," I said evenly. Vanessa let out a hollow laugh. "You think you're so composed. What do you want?" she swallowed. Then she dropped it like a grenade. "I'm pregnant." The words seemed to echo in the cold air between us. Trevor's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. I didn't move. "What? You heard me." Her chin lifted slightly. "I'm pregnant." Silence stretched. Maple barked once behind me, then quieted. "How far along?" I asked. 8 weeks. 8 weeks. That meant before the party, before the lock change, before the public humiliation on my porch. "And you're telling me now because?" I asked carefully, her eyes flashed. "Because you think you can just throw me out and cut me off without consequences." There it was, not excitement, not fear, leverage. Trevor finally spoke, his voice low. "We were going to tell everyone together." "At what moment?" I asked. "Between breaking into my house and rewriting the family narrative." Vanessa's face twisted. "This isn't about that." "It feels exactly about that." She stepped closer to the door. "You're going to be an aunt." The word should have warmed something inside me. Instead, I felt my spine stiffen. "And," I asked quietly, "and you don't abandon family when there's a baby involved." "I didn't abandon you," I replied. "I set a boundary." "You locked me out," she shouted. "Crossed every line I gave you." Tears welled in her eyes now, but they didn't fall. "You're really going to make your pregnant sister scramble for a place to live?" Trevor looked at me then, really looked at me. There was something different in his expression this time, not defiance, uncertainty. "I don't know what's real right now," I admitted. "Is this true?" Vanessa gasped. "You think I'd lie about that?" "I think you've lied about other things." Her mouth opened, then closed. Trevor exhaled slowly. "It's real." The air shifted again. A baby. An innocent life suddenly standing in the middle of a battlefield it didn't create. Vanessa's voice softened, almost trembling now. "We need stability." "You needed responsibility months ago," I replied. She wiped under her eye angrily. "So that's it, you're choosing pride over your niece or nephew." I felt the weight of that accusation press against my ribs, but something steadier rose beneath it. "No," I said quietly. "I'm choosing sanity." Her shoulders sagged slightly, as if she hadn't expected that answer. Trevor stepped forward. "What do you want from us?" The question lingered. Because for the first time it wasn't framed as "what do you owe us?" It was "what do you want?" I looked at both of them, at the exhaustion, the tension, the fragility of whatever truth was standing on my porch. "I want honesty," I said. "And I want accountability. Pregnancy doesn't erase what happened." Vanessa's lips pressed into a thin line. "Always needed to win." "No," I said softly. "I've always needed peace." The wind picked up off the lake, biting and sharp. For the first time since I changed the locks, doubt flickered at the edges of my resolve, not because she was pregnant, but because I realized this wasn't just about property anymore. It was about who I was willing to become in order to protect it. And that question was far harder than turning a key. The morning after the pregnancy announcement, I didn't call mine. I called a lawyer. Daniel Brooks had been my college debate partner before he became a contracts attorney in Grand Rapids. He answered on the second ring. "Natalie Harper only calls me when she's about to dismantle someone," he said lightly. "What happened?" "I need to confirm something," I replied. "If someone is temporarily staying in my home without a lease, and I've revoked permission, am I legally required to support them in any way?" "No," he said immediately. "You're not financially responsible for an adult relative. Pregnancy doesn't change property rights." I exhaled slowly. "Good." After we hung up, I stared at my banking app. Every month for the past year, I'd transferred Vanessa small amounts. "Just until we're stable," she'd say, groceries, gas, a short-term loan that was never repaid. I opened the recurring transfer, deleted it. Then I sent one message: "We need to meet, public place." Noon. She responded within seconds. "Fine." We met at a small diner 15 minutes from the lake. Neutral territory, fluorescent lights, coffee that tasted like burnt ambition. Vanessa slid into the booth across from me, sunglasses on despite the gray sky. Trevor followed quietly. "You look calm," she said. "I am. That's new. So is this situation." The waitress poured coffee and left. "I spoke with a lawyer," I began. Vanessa's jaw tightened. Of course you did. I'm not legally obligated to house you or fund you. Trevor looked down at his hands. You cut off the transfers, Vanessa said flatly. Yes, you're unbelievable. No, I replied evenly. I'm done being your safety net. She leaned forward. I'm pregnant. I know. And you're still doing this. Yes, silence, then I said it. Get a job, Vanessa. Her head snapped back. Excuse me, you're capable, so is Trevor. You'll either grow up or fall apart, but I'm not financing either outcome. Trevor finally spoke, voice quiet. We're trying. Try harder, I said. Vanessa pushed her coffee away. You love this. Love what? Feeling superior. I shook my head. No, I love sleeping without resentment. Her lips trembled, but she held my gaze. You're choosing money over family. I'm choosing boundaries over chaos. The booth felt smaller. I won't help financially anymore, I continued. Not rent, not bills, not emergencies created by poor planning. Trevor looked pale now. Vanessa stood abruptly. You're cold. Maybe, I said softly. Or maybe I finally learned. She grabbed her purse. You'll regret this. Maybe, I replied, but not today. She stormed out of the diner, the bell above the door clanging sharply. Trevor lingered. I didn't know about the transfers, he admitted quietly. I figured. He nodded once, then followed her out. I stayed seated a moment longer, staring at the untouched coffee between us. It didn't feel triumphant. It felt necessary. For the first time since this began, I wasn't reacting. I was deciding. And sometimes peace doesn't come from fixing people. It comes from refusing to fund their dysfunction. 2 weeks later, I finally felt brave enough to invite people over again. Saturday afternoon, soft sunlight over the lake, a fire pit crackling outside. Maya and her husband Daniel sat on the deck with glasses of wine. My neighbor Elise brought homemade cornbread. Laughter, real laughter, filled the house. For the first time in months, it felt like mine again. You seem lighter, Maya said quietly as we stood in the kitchen. I am, I admitted. Boundaries look good on me, she grinned. They always did. That's when the pounding started, not a knock, pounding. The entire room went still. I didn't need to look through the window to know. Vanessa. Don't, Maya whispered, already sensing it. But I was already walking toward the door. When I opened it, Vanessa stood on the porch, hair windblown, eyes blazing. Trevor hovered behind her, tense. You're unbelievable, she snapped, loud enough for my guests to hear inside. Hosting parties like nothing happened. This isn't a party, I replied calmly. It's dinner. In my family's house. It's not your house. She shoved against the door, trying to step forward. I blocked her. You don't get to shut me out, she shouted. From behind me, I felt my friends gathering quietly in the hallway, witnesses. You're not family anymore, Vanessa screamed. Don't act like it. The words sliced through the air. I stepped outside, closing the door gently behind me so my guests wouldn't have to absorb the rest of this. The lake wind whipped around us. Lower your voice, Trevor muttered to her. No, she turned back to me. You think you can erase me, you think locking doors makes you powerful. No, I said steadily. It makes me safe. Her eyes glittered. I deserve a place here. You deserve accountability. I'm carrying your niece or nephew, she cried. And that doesn't give you ownership of my life. She lunged toward the door again. I'm coming in. I stepped fully into her path. If you take one more step, I said quietly, I will call the police again. Her face twisted in disbelief. In front of your friends? Yes. Silence. Behind her, Trevor looked exhausted. Vanessa, stop. She looked at him like he'd betrayed her. Then she turned back to me, voice dropping to a hiss. You're going to end up alone. I met her gaze without flinching. Alone is peaceful, I said. Chaos isn't. For a second, something in her expression cracked, hurt, anger, fear all tangled together, then she straightened. You'll regret this, she said one last time. No, I replied softly. I won't. She spun and marched toward the car. Trevor lingered a moment, meeting my eyes. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Then he followed her. The SUV peeled out of the driveway, gravel scattering. I stood there a moment longer, letting the wind cool my skin. When I walked back inside, the room was silent. Maya stepped forward first. Are you okay? I nodded. Yes. Elise gave a small, approving smile. That was clear, I exhaled slowly. It needed to be. As conversation slowly resumed and the fire pit crackled back to life, I realized something profound. Vanessa had tried to humiliate me publicly. Instead, she had witnessed my boundary hold, without shaking. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was fighting to keep my home. I had already claimed it, fully. The next morning the lake was gray and still when I heard tires on gravel again. I didn't rush to the window this time, I already knew. When I opened the door, Trevor stood alone at first. Vanessa was a few steps behind him, hands folded in front of her coat like she was bracing against more than the cold. They both looked smaller. Trevor cleared his throat. "Can we talk?" "You have 5 minutes," I replied. Vanessa didn't argue. That was new. "We lost the apartment," Trevor said. "Application got denied. My contract job fell through." Vanessa stared at the porch boards. No fire, no performance. "We've been staying at a motel," Trevor continued. "It's not sustainable." Silence stretched between us. "And," I asked evenly. He swallowed. "I'm sorry." The words weren't dramatic. They weren't defensive, they were simple. Behind him, Vanessa finally lifted her eyes to mine. They weren't blazing this time, they were tired. "I'm sorry too," she said quietly. The lake wind moved between us, carrying the weight of everything that had happened: broken trust, public fights, late-night calls, slammed doors. "We handled this wrong," Trevor added. "All of it." Vanessa nodded faintly. "I did." I searched her face for sarcasm. There wasn't any. "We thought you'd fold," Trevor admitted. "You always used to." That one was honest enough to sting. "I'm not folding anymore," I said calmly. Vanessa's voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "We lost everything, I see that now." It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't shouted, it was flat and true. I didn't answer immediately. I let the silence sit, let them feel it. For once I wasn't rushing to fix the discomfort. Finally I spoke. "There's a guest cottage on the property," I said. Both of them looked up at once. "You can stay there temporarily," I continued. "Not the main house, the cottage." Vanessa's shoulders sagged in visible relief. "Thank you. I'm not finished." Trevor nodded. "We're listening." "There will be conditions," I said evenly. "Written ones." Vanessa hesitated. "Like rules, like a contract." Trevor actually exhaled in something close to acceptance. "That's fair." "No access to the main house without permission," I continued. "No guests, no financial support from me. Rent will be minimal but documented. And if a single boundary is crossed, you're out." Vanessa swallowed. "Okay." "I'm serious," I added. "This is the last time." Trevor met my eyes directly. "We understand." I stepped back slightly. "Wait here." Inside, I sat at my kitchen table, the same one where so many arguments had unfolded, and pulled out a legal template Daniel had once emailed me for short-term property agreements. My hands were steady as I filled in the details. Names, dates, conditions. When I returned to the porch, I handed Trevor the papers and a pen. "Read it," I said. He did, carefully, no jokes. No eye rolls. Vanessa leaned into him, scanning every line. When he finished, he signed. Vanessa hesitated only a second before signing beneath him. I took the papers back and held them for a moment. This wasn't revenge, it wasn't surrender, it was structure. "You can move into the cottage this afternoon," I said. Vanessa's eyes shimmered slightly. "Thank you." "This isn't forgiveness," I replied. "It's an opportunity." Trevor nodded. "Waste it?" I stepped aside to let them gather their things from the porch where I'd had a few boxed essentials waiting. As they walked toward the cottage path, slower, quieter, something settled inside me. They hadn't won, but I hadn't destroyed them either. I had drawn a line, and made them sign it. 3 weeks later, the property felt different. Not divided, defined. The guest cottage lights turned on each evening around 6. Trevor had found steady work with a marina maintenance crew nearby. He left early, came back tired, and without fail walked Maple before dinner. Vanessa kept mostly to herself at first. No music drifting across the yard. No dramatic phone calls on the porch, just quiet. One afternoon, I noticed her pulling weeds along the stone path between the main house and the dock. "You don't have to do that," I said from the deck. She looked up, brushing dirt from her hands. "I know." It was the same answer Trevor had once given me. That wasn't lost on me. Later that week, she knocked on my door, knocked. "Can I borrow the ladder?" she asked. "For what?" "I want to repaint the cottage trim, it's chipped." I studied her face, searching for sarcasm. There wasn't any. "You can borrow it," I said. "Bring it back." "I will," and she did, small things, consistent things. One evening, Trevor approached while I was sitting on the dock watching the sunset bleed into the lake. "I've kept every receipt," he said quietly, handing me a small envelope. "Rent, utilities. Even groceries we bought separately." I flipped through them, documented, organized. "You've kept your word," I said. He nodded once. "It matters now." Vanessa joined us slowly, hands resting protectively over her stomach. I've scheduled an appointment with a career counselor in town, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. Part-time remote work, something stable. That's good, I replied. Silence settled, not awkward, just honest. You were right, she added after a moment. I needed structure. It wasn't an apology, but it was recognition. The lake stretched wide and calm before us, the sky turning soft lavender. Peace didn't feel dramatic, it felt earned. I wasn't naive. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight. Forgiveness doesn't bloom because paperwork was signed, but the house was quiet, orderly, mine. And as I stood and headed back toward the deck lights glowing warmly against the darkening water, I realized something steady and grounding. Peace isn't about pushing people out. It's about knowing exactly where they stand. And for the first time in a long time, everyone knew their place. 1 year later, on a warm September evening, I stood on the renovated deck of my lakeside house and watched string lights flicker on as guests arrived. This time, every car in the driveway belonged there. The cottage had been repainted a soft gray in the spring. Vanessa and Trevor had moved into their own rental across town 6 months ago, on their own lease, with their own savings. The transition had been quiet. No drama, no slammed doors. Growth rarely makes noise. Inside, laughter echoed through my kitchen as Maya arranged flowers on the island. You did it, she said softly when I stepped in. You kept your house. I smiled. I kept myself. That was the difference. Vanessa hadn't come tonight. Instead, a card had arrived that morning. Simple cream envelope, familiar handwriting. Thank you for the push I needed. No excuses, no accusations, just that. I placed the card in a small drawer in my desk. Not displayed, not discarded. A record, a reminder. Trevor had texted earlier in the week, we're doing okay. She's working part-time remote now. Baby's healthy, the baby. My niece Clara, I visit sometimes, on my terms. I bring gifts when I choose, not when I'm pressured. I leave when I want to. There is no resentment in the drive home anymore. Just distance where distance belongs. As the sun dipped low over the lake, I stepped outside again. The water reflected a sky so calm it almost looked unreal. A year ago, this porch had been a battlefield. Now it was mine, not because I fought louder, but because I fought smarter. Boundaries are strange things. People call them cold, dramatic, selfish. But sometimes dignity starts with a locked door. And sometimes love only survives when it's no longer entitled. I raised my glass toward the lake and let the quiet settle into my bones. If you've ever had to draw a line with someone you love, tell me, where are you watching from, and what did it cost you to protect your peace? Because if there's one thing I learned, it's this. Peace isn't given, it's claimed. And once you claim it, you don't give it back.